welcome back to the Sachsenring for day 2 of round 6 of the ADAC GT Masters. We're getting ready for our second race of the weekend. It will be race 12 of a 14-race season, and we start off the day with the qualifying session. Conditions at the moment are good. Air temperature 8.9 degrees centigrade. The track 10.7 degrees centigrade. We looked there at yesterday's pole sitter. It was Raffaele Marciello who put the car on pole position. It was Daniel Juncadella who brought it home and across the line to receive the checkered flag, having taken over from Raffaele Marciello, but they came him in second place, having been beaten by fellow Mercedes team, driven by Jules Gounon and Fabian Schiller. So Schiller and Gounon move up to third place in the point standings as a result of that win, but it's still a healthy lead of 22 points for Raffaele Marciello over Christian Engelhardt and Ayan Guven. The Team U Sportwagen Technique Porsche suffering in the closing stages of the race, a puncture on the final corner, seeing Ayan Guven dropping back, and they did bring the car home in 5th place, getting mugged by Jan Marszalkowski at the line, and just lost out on that 4th place. The puncture was one of many headlines yesterday that involved the word tyres. Tyres, tyres, tyres. The Sachsenring is a circuit which has always been pretty heavy on the tyre wear, and yesterday was very much the case with a new compound being brought by Pirelli this year. It's going to carry on being very much a story again today, isn't it, Adam Weller?
Absolutely, Brian. I mean, I walked around the paddock yesterday, and if I didn't bring up tyres myself, it usually came out of the driver's lips within 10 words. I think I need to do some like average deltas on how long it takes them to complain about tyres in conversation here at the Sachsenring. Of course, so heavy on the left-hand bends here. The right-hand tyres really do take a kicking. I was speaking to Jack Aitken just about an hour ago, and he said, well, you know what, there are some circuits where the degradation is very asymmetrical, a lot of punishment to one side of the car, named the Red Bull Ring as an example of that, but he said, no, the Sachsenring, this is quite extreme. It's his first experience here at the Sachsenring. It's the first experience for a few of these drivers here at this 14-turn layout, and well, let's see if any of the first-timers can get themselves up towards the sharp end in this qualifying session.
And we will find out, we'll start to find out some of those answers in less than 2 minutes when this qualifying session starts. The Sachsenring, as already said, a unique circuit. It does bite quite hard. We've seen quite a lot of drama yesterday. Our race marshals had their work cut out in all of the classes that are racing here. A very unusual circuit, often used for MotoGP. It is 3.671 kilometers around, which is a little over 2.2 miles, with 14 turns, 4 to the right and 10 to the left. Cars running in an anti-clockwise direction, one of only 2 circuits where we run in anti-clockwise direction, but lots of undulation. Gradient of 12.8% at the steepest point. Quite a few blind crests, lots of ups, lots of downs, and a fairly abrasive track surface, as already mentioned, adding to the pressure on the tyres. Another pressure, well, the forecast said it was going to be raining at this point. That's what we saw yesterday. At the moment, there is cloud around, but lots of blue sky. I think it's exceptionally unlikely we're going to see rain within the next 20 minutes, but I wouldn't put a lot of money on it staying dry for the entire day. The race takes place at 1 o'clock local time, so we've got a little while yet, and an awful lot can change in terms of the weather, so we're going to keep an eye on that. That may well be a factor. As you look there at Jules Gounon in the car, focusing, and interesting, just looking at his hand movements. Now, what is he doing there, Adam?
I think he's visualizing the circuit, to be honest with you. Yeah, that certainly looks like what he's doing, or maybe he's practicing a little jig if he wins the race later today. Maybe, yeah. I mean, he busted out the dance moves yesterday, didn't he? But 2 years in a row now, of course, that Jules Gounon has touched the top step here at the Sachsenring.
More than touched it. He absolutely dominated it yesterday. Great job with him and Fabian Schiller. And at the risk of repeating myself from yesterday, Fabian Schiller drove such a mature race. I really felt as though that driver, without wishing to sound in any way condescending, I think he really came of age yesterday. Fabian Schiller, not Fabian Schiller, Jules Gounon, we didn't even realise, didn't even know he was going to be here this weekend, because it looked at one point as though a back injury that he had sustained a few weeks back in the end of August was going to put him out for much of the season. But he's made quite a miraculous recovery. And apart from a little bit of pain getting in and out of the car during the driver change yesterday, he appears to have totally got on top of that issue and is very much on form. There is Dries Vanthoor. He's sitting in for Ricardo Feller this weekend. Ricardo Feller on duties elsewhere. Always good to welcome Dries Vanthoor back to the ADAC GT Masters. Such a competitive driver, one of the real superstars of GT3 racing. He's in the Montplace by Land Audi alongside Yusuf Vega, but yesterday had a torrid time. Very much at the back of the pack for the entire day, coming home in 17th place eventually. We'll be looking to improve on that. You can see the clouds on the horizon. You can see the blue sky that is currently above us here at the Sachsenring. This is a short, sharp qualifying session of just 20 minutes. And as with yesterday, the temperature is rising very much by the minute as long as these sunny conditions prevail. So it would seem likely that the track will get faster and faster as the track warms up and as more rubber goes down. And as with yesterday, we would expect drivers to come out, put in a banker lap, maybe come back into the pits, and then in the last 5 minutes of this session for it to get really busy. But as with yesterday, there is the risk of red flags. We had 2 of them in qualifying yesterday, and the second one really scuppered an awful lot of drivers' chances of having a shot at pole position.
It did. To your point about banker laps, for those of you who are weak of heart, I'm afraid a lot of them don't bother with the banker laps, meaning you are on the edge of your seat wondering if they're actually going to get a time in, should there be another red flag. I was actually speaking yesterday to Ben Green in the Schubert BMW camp, and he said, I was begging the team to let me go out there and do a flyer in the first 10 minutes. Literally no one had, and I could feel the red flag coming from a mile off, as did pretty much everyone. No one was too surprised that we got 2 red flags yesterday. Cars can end up in the gravel, especially when they're really pushing the limits around that middle sector, turn 8, turn 9, through to the waterfall section at turn 12. It's very tricky.
And to add to that, Elias Sepinen, the opposite. He said, yes, I am so pleased I put in a banker lap. He was the one who brought out one of the red flags, and he still managed to start the race in P7 as a result of that banker lap. So a lot of strategy. Of course, the tyres are limited here. You take too much out too soon, and you're not going to be there or thereabouts to get a shot at pole position at the end. You can see the Team U Sportwagen Technique Porsche, driven by Arjen Guven, with 4 inflated tyres on the wagon. He's just done a cycle lap straight back into the pit lane, which seems to be quite common. We do have quite a few cars out on track, though, circulating. Yesterday, the pole position time was a 1:17.878. That was set by Raffaele Marciello. I expect that would be something similar today. That's the kind of times we're looking at, in the high 17s, maybe low 18s. We'll keep an eye on the timing screens. I think it is going to be a while before we see anybody posting anything in the 17s.
Yes, typically the times start to spill out of everybody in the last 10 minutes or so. Typically, they like to do more than one warm-up lap around here. Just 3.6 kilometers and 2.2 miles of circuit to play with. So the warm-up process can take a while, especially because there are no tyre heaters at play here in the ADAC GT Masters. You see there Jules Gounon coming into the pit lane after doing a pair of laps to embed the tyres. And no doubt we'll see him towards the sharp end. He was the quickest man in FP2 yesterday, the first driver of the weekend to dip below the 118 barrier, clearly proving that the back issues, the injury that he sustained last month in the USA, the Virginia International Raceway, isn't holding him back in the slightest. A little bit of bed rest and whatever the French equivalent of Ant and Deck is for a few weeks, and he's right back on it.
Sounds like hell on earth to
Indeed.
me, but there we go. We did mention Schubert Motorsport earlier. There is only one Schubert Motorsport BMW here this year. Niklas Kruten and Nicky Katzberg are on duty in other places, in other events, so they are not here. So 2 of the Schubert cars have become one, and Jesse Krohn and Ben Green have combined to create a team. And so Schubert just fielding that one BMW here. Interesting. Most of the cars back in the pit lane again. What is the mentality behind going out, doing one slow lap and then coming back into the pits?
Well, there is an element of scrubbing the tyres. You often see, of course, when we head out onto the circuit post-pit stop, that it takes a long time for the cars to get up to temperature and get up to speed, especially in a series where tyres are swapped. We don't swap the tyres halfway through the race here, but there is, you know, resin on the tyres and things like that. We just see a decal there, "We will miss you, Svenny." That is, unfortunately, we got some bad news from the Land Motorsport camp that one of their catering crew, Svenny, who was very popular indeed, passed away between Lausitz and Sachsenring. So the team are carrying decals as a tribute to him. And sad to see a member of the paddock that was very well liked no longer with us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and our thoughts very much with the family of Svenny as well. So the cars back into the pits. It's all quiet. There is nobody out on track at the moment as we reach, we're almost getting towards halfway point. There is absolutely no action going on. As predicted, it's going to all kick off in a bit. Now, while we have a moment to remind you, this Sachsenring circuit is divided into 3 sections, as are most circuits, Sector 1, Sector 2, Sector 3. You'll have indications on your screen, little boxes representing each of the sectors. If a box is green, it means the driver is doing a personal best in that sector, or has done a personal best in that sector. If the box is red, it means that he hasn't. If the box is purple, it means that the driver has been quicker than anybody in that sector. And of course, if a driver has 3 purple sectors, that is Christmas as far as they're concerned.
Absolutely right. Yes, that means you are not only the fastest across the lap, but you've also got all of the optimum sector times. That's about as good as it can possibly get. We did take a look just briefly at Jack Aitken a moment ago. We were talking about the motivations behind doing these slow laps at the start of the session. Part of that as well is system checks, especially for those that have maybe had a slightly second-hand car at the end of yesterday's race. You will recall, if you were watching yesterday, that it was not a good day at all for the 63 Lamborghini duo of Albert Costa Balboa and Jack Aitken. Spoke to Jack this morning and he said, well, to be honest, what we do between qualifying and race, we typically switch out the diffs, and in the process of switching the diffs, there seemed to be a problem with the installation, so they had differential issues. It wasn't working properly all throughout yesterday's race, and that, of course, is hugely important. The differential plays a pivotal role in delivering the power down onto the road surface, and if you have a differential that's not playing ball or not playing in quite the way you expect, then that's going to make for a very hairy drive, and I'd say that's probably a good descriptor for both Jack and Albert's stints yesterday.
Cars with engines running in the pit lane. I think it's going to be suddenly like the M25 at rush hour when this lot come out, which will happen very shortly. To remind you, there are points paid in qualifying nowadays. There has been for the last couple of years. 3 points for pole position, 2 points for second, and 1 for third. There's a 22-point gap between first and second in the points championship. It's Marciello who leads the way over Einstein Guven and Christian Engelhardt by 22 points. But there are still 84 points available this season. So 3 races, including the one this afternoon. So still plenty to play for. Marciello by no means has this one in the bag. He has got a lot of work to do. 1 DNF. And this will flip around in an instant. 2 of the yellow Mambas there, the number 84 car. And that will have at the wheel Frankie Bird. It was Elias Seppänen who qualified it yesterday. And it will be Daniel Juncadella who qualifies the other of the yellow Mambas, of course, sharing the duties with Raffaele Marciello. Juncadella not in the championship hunt. He's jumped into that seat midway through the season, and he is quite a long way down the points order. And there you can see him there. The engine bursts into life, and suddenly all bar 2 of the cars are out on the circuit very shortly. It will be all of them.
I must say, I don't think I'd be a big fan if I were in Raffaele Marciello's position. I would not like the teammate musical chairs that I've had going on around me. You know, a solid, consistent teammate, I think I'd need an anchor point to hold on to if I were a racing driver. One of many reasons why I'm not. But you can't get a much more capable teammate than Danny Juncadella. Those two long-time rivals in the past in Formula 3 competition. Now they combine in ADAC GT Masters. I'm sure Danny still needles him about the fact that he won the FIA 3 European Championship in 2012, but that's all in the past now. They are teammates.
And I think you'll find it was probably Raffaele Marciello who was the driving force between many of those teammate changes, if I might say so. Of course, Jonathan Aberdeen, he started off the season with, then it was Lorenzo Ferrari. Mauro Engel, that was a very successful combination, but some controversy at the Nürburgring. I think Mauro Engel perhaps decided he needed a bit of time to cool off after that one. And Daniel Juncadella, who of course was alongside Jan Marszałkowski at the start of the season, has moved across to that seat and has actually proven to be really solid. Of course, he has worked with Marciello in many other events as well. And actually, Marvin Dietz coming in alongside Jan Marszałkowski feels like that's been a really good match as well.
Yeah, definitely the case. Jules Gounon, we ride on board with him. Still certainly not going at full pace, but getting a little bit quicker. Gounon in 2016 took his first ever win here in the ADAC GT Masters with Callaway competition. Did I say something funny?
No, I just can't believe it that we are 8 minutes from the end of the session and nobody has put a time. We get a red flag now. What are they going to do?
Well, I think at this stage we'd just about get the session restarted. Just about. But if it was to red flag now, Marszałkowski would be on pole. He's the first person to actually break the beam with a time. It's a 1:27.366, which is nothing like a competitive time. We've got another 10 seconds to find yet. Aynchenn Guven's trying to find a bit more of it than Gounon there. Has a little run up the inside at Sachsen.
Finding space on this circuit is going to be a challenge because every single car is now out on track. They need the space to be able to put in that hot lap, so they're all just jostling for that position to get that gap in front, that gap behind, and then on the open road to open it all up. But of course, we only need to get a couple of red flags like we had yesterday, and all that warming up suddenly is for nothing. So there is Jan Marszałkowski just going past the yellow Mamba around the outside, but he has gone quickest of anybody in Sector 1. Now, how does that time compare to what we were looking at yesterday?
I don't think we're quite there yet. Unfortunately, he had a bit of an issue at turn 6 into 7. He got a little bit of oversteer into 6. That means he missed the apex for 7. He's clearly backed out of the lap at this point. The last couple of corners haven't been that aggressive. Yes, he will improve upon his 1:27, but I think now we might start to see actual flying laps starting with this man, Marszałkowski. He's got a lot of clear road ahead of him as well.
Keep an eye on those little boxes at the side of the drivers' names. As explained earlier, you can see the drivers putting up lots of personal bests. Of course, a lot of purples to start off with because everybody is just improving gradually. But in a moment, we're going to see the really competitive times start to come in.
Gounon is on a fast lap at the moment, I think. Although he's just backed out of it because Guven was backing out as well. So he had two sectors that looked somewhat competitive. I think it would have broken him into the 18s, but he's abandoned the lap there.
So we have just over 6 minutes remaining of this session. A 1:22.911 from Jan Marszałkowski is the fastest time. That will be eclipsed quite quickly, I would expect. Remember, it was something 5 seconds quicker than that yesterday. So the car's now building up the temperature in the tyres. No tyre warmers, as we've already mentioned. Getting the cars up to speed, getting the rhythm. This 5 minutes is going to be critical. This circuit, overtaking is not easy, as Frankie Bird goes to the top of the timing sheets. Overtaking is not easy, so grid position is really important. This next 5 minutes is going to be critical.
And Marszalkowski just coming out the final corner now, and I think he has improved. Yes, a 1:18.747. That's our first somewhat representative time. Jack Aitken also on a quick lap, as is this man, Marco Mappelli. The two Lamborghinis heading into the final corner now. Aitken will be the first of the two across the line. Can he get himself into the 1:18s? Yes, he can. He goes top on an 18.5. Mappelli on an 18.2. They've arrived.
Finally, with 5 minutes remaining. Welcome to what we could have just had a cup of tea for the first quarter of an hour and just gone for a 5-minute shootout. Here's Gounon, 2 purple sectors. This is potentially going to be a pole position, a provisional pole position for Jules Gounon. Out of turn 14, that steep climb. Is he in the 17s? Yes, he is. Quickest time of the weekend so far, a 1:17.551. That is a magnificent time from Jules Gounon. Could he be about to set back-to-back wins this weekend?
That is a statement, and that is a benchmark. Of course, lest we forget, he's not carrying the ballast here in this qualifying session, but he will have a 20-kilo penalty for yesterday's win to contend with at the start of the race later on today. He set all 3 purple sectors during that flying lap, so he really is the benchmark and the standard for everybody at the moment. Oftentimes you'll see different cars best in different sectors, and of course the whole lap together is whoa, and that's a Vega round, isn't it?
It is.
Oh, it's Haase, sorry,
yeah, Christopher Haase. Wow, not often you see Christopher Haase spinning like that, but he's recovered. He's not collided with anything or anyone, which is good news, so he continues on his way. Red flag warriors. You can breathe a sigh of relief, because that is exactly the kind of thing that could have brought out a red flag. He picked it all up, and then it just snatched around and pointing in the wrong direction, but the car's coming towards you. I should think you'll need a fresh pair of trousers after that one. We talked about success penalty just now to remind you that Fabian Schiller and Jules Gounon in the race, but not in qualifying, so an unusual shot, will be carrying 20 kilos extra as a result of their win yesterday. This car that you're riding on board with will be carrying 5 kilos extra because of their 3rd place, and Daniel Juncker, Raffaele Marciello will be carrying 10 kilograms extra because of their 2nd place. They don't carry it in qualifying, but they will in the race. So if Gounon does start from pole position, he will have an extra 20 kilos that he will have to tug around with him for the entirety of the race.
No one else has broken under the 1:18 barrier just yet, only Jules Gounon. Dennis Marshall, currently our 2nd fastest driver, very, very wide at Waterfall. He's 2/10 off the time of Gounon right now, but he's drifted wide into Sachsen by the looks of it. Is his foot still in it? Yes. Maybe, yes, but it doesn't look like the fastest run through turn 13, if you ask me. Christopher Mies has just gone 2nd fastest on a 1:18.1. Marshall was still committed, but maybe a bit too much.
Got to keep your foot buried on it, why don't you? Jules Gounon, that 1:17.551, that was astonishing lap, and I have to say, we often see in GT Masters the entire field separated by 1 second. It doesn't feel as though anyone can get anywhere near that time that Gounon has set.
No, that does have the whiff of an unbeatable time about it, doesn't it? If anyone can beat it, I'd maybe put my money on Chris Mies, who had an air of confidence about him yesterday. He's currently 2nd fastest out there. He said, you know what, I'm not sure if we're able to beat those Mercedes. They are very quick, but I am confident about my qualifying pace in the Audi, the winningest car here at the Sachsenring and ADAC GT Masters by a considerable margin. 13 victories for Audi since they debuted in the series back in 2009 here at the Sachsenring. The next best, 6 wins for Mercedes after yesterday's result.
I see from our timing screens that car 48 has not got a working transponder. Daniel Juncker and Raffaele Marciello, they are currently in 7th on the timing screens. Now, I don't know whether the non-working transponder is going to affect what we see in terms of their lap times.
So the lap times will still be registered, but they're not going to appear. I think we might lose the sector splits for Juncker, but we'll still get the end of lap times.
Okay.
So I believe that they still have a fallback system at the start-finish line, but we're just going to have a bit less detail as to exactly what Danny's doing.
So at the moment, the number 48 car with Daniel Juncker at the wheel is down in P7. Of course, Raffaele Marciello is depending on Juncker to do all the hard work to keep his championship lead nice and healthy. Of course, he will be taking over the seat of that car halfway through the race, but it is Junkadea who's doing all the hard work this morning.
Vantor just a quarter of a second off of Gunon at the middle sector split. This could be a second place lap for Dries. No, not quite. Remains in 4th place on a 118.196. Poor final sector there. He personal bested in the first 2, but was a little way off his own benchmark in the final.
It's Jules Gunon leading the way, the only driver into the 117s at 117.551. Then Christopher Mies with a 118.106 ahead of Dennis Marshall. Dries Vantor in 4th. Marco Mappelli, good run there, in 5th. And then Jan Marszałkowski in 6th place. Daniel Junkadea 7th. Matthias Drudy in 8th. Christopher Haase, despite that moment, in 9th. And 10th place, Jack Aitken. Checkered flag is out already. That really was a 5-minute dash for the cash, wasn't it? That's kind of crept up on me. Any drivers that are still on a lap, as long as they cross the line before the clock struck 0, that lap will count. But the checkered flag is out. We are in the closing stages of this qualifying session.
Jules Gunon, I think I've never seen a driver look more safe in pole position as the clock hits 0. A lot of the drivers are already back into the pit lane. And we've got the team manager for Ian Chen Guven and indeed for Jules Gunon, interestingly, requested to race control. Oh, good Lord, could there be an epilogue here? Let's wait and see. Certainly Gunon feels happy with his time, and justifiably so. He is over half a second ahead of the pack.
I should think that race control are going to say, you know that 20-kilo success penalty? Can we make it 30, please? Because otherwise you're going to lap the whole field. Gunon, he will have that additional weight that will affect his performance when the race starts. So he really does need that little bit of a half a second that he's got. But a phenomenal job from Jules Gunon, stealing the headlines. It's Jules Gunon on pole position for race 12 of a 14-race season in the ADAC GT Masters. It'll be Christopher Mies who starts alongside him on the front row. Dennis Marshall and Dries Vantor will make it an all-Audi row 2. So 3 Audis in the top 4. They're having a much better day today than they did yesterday so far. Marco Mappelli, the highest finishing Lamborghini, will be in 5th. And then Jan Marszałkowski, another solid result from him in the Mercedes in 6th place. Daniel Junkadea down in 7th, and Marciello will probably not be too chuffed about that.
No, I don't think that's ideal for him. They scored their 4th pole position of the season yesterday. Today, though, it's Jules Gunon posing for the pictures and taking the spoils in the early stages of the day. This is actually the first time that a Mercedes other than the 48 car has been on pole so far this year. Pole position number 5 of the season for Mercedes. Pole position number 1 for Drago Racing Team ZVO.
And that's Jules Gunon who is at the wheel of that car. It'll be Christopher Mies from the Montpellier Land Audi, and then Dennis Marshall, Dries Vantor, Marco Mappelli, Jan Marszałkowski, Daniel Junkadea and Matthias Drudy rounding out the top 8 on the grid. It is Mercedes, Audi, Lamborghini, surrounded by 2 Mercedes and another Audi. Our highest Porsche quite a long way back, and that is in the hands of Sven Muller, all the way down in 11th place. We'll see that in just a few moments. 9th, Christopher Haase, despite that scary moment. Jack Aitken, he'll be disappointed with 10th. And there is that Porsche with Sven Muller at the wheel for Allied Racing. Marcus Winkelhock in 12th. Jesse Krohn, the one and only BMW, in 13th, ahead of Frank Pereira, Ian Chen Guven, and Frankie Bird in 16th place. And that's quite a lot of work to do for the other of the yellow Mambas as well from back there. In 17th, Konsta Lappalainen, Luca Engsler in 18th, and Norbert Siedler in the Audi for East Talent Racing in 19th place. It is once again set fair for an interesting, exciting afternoon. And Jules Gunon has just closed in on the championship hunt. Once again, another 3 points. It was 3rd in the timings. Dennis Marshall for Rutronic Racing. And Dennis Marshall, who is sharing the duties with Kim Louis Schramm, looking to improve on their 3rd place from yesterday. 2nd, Christopher Mies, defending champion in ADAC GT Masters, who is sharing driving duties with Tim Zimmerman for Montpellier Land Motorsports. But headlines, what headlines, what a phenomenal pole position going to Jules Gunon, the Drago Racing Team ZVO Mercedes on another level. Pole position for Jules Gunon. So celebrations in the pit lane for Jules Gounon, and celebrations indeed. I don't know where he dug that from. It seems to me that since he's come back from his injury, he's actually gone up a level as opposed to going down a level. Amazing stuff.
Yeah, really is great to see that Jules Gounon has bounced back so nicely there. Raffaele Marciello with a 17-point advantage over Guven and Engelhardt coming into this one. I'm sure it's going to be a nervous watch when we go racing at 1 p.m. local time. I agree, actually. We're just both conferring in the box. We think that's not quite right on your screen. But it is going to be interesting for Raffaele Marciello today. He could be a significant step closer to the championship come 2 p.m. local time.
By my reckoning, as we look at the replays, it is a 30-point gap between Schiller, Gounon and Marciello and Engelhardt. 22 points, Ayhancan Guven and Albert Costa, and Christian Engelhardt. Gotta get your hopes up there. So, highlights, there we are. Join us for the race, 1 o'clock this afternoon. We'll see you then.